Okay, let's talk about installing Windows 10. This is under deploying Windows 10. So first we'll talk about installing it, and then we'll talk about actually deploying it, particularly in a corporate environment. So installation. My online lectures right here. I clicked on it, and here are the slides. All right. So primarily we're going to just talk about different ways to install, different strategies to install Windows 10. Just as a general concept, it's a little awkward being here since we already installed it in our labs. So as you can see, it's a short presentation. So let's get started. All right. So let's talk about different ways, different methods to install Windows 10. The traditional, the old school way is, well, a DVD boot installation, or nowadays that we have a lot more laptops without DVD drives because they take up more time, more room, and people don't use DVDs as often as they once did. We have USB. You can have a USB installation as well. So most people nowadays will download the ISO. If you want to take the ISO and burn it directly to a DVD, you can do that to install it into a DVD. Or you could convert it into a USB installation USB. You got to make the USB bootable and then copy the files over to it. So there is a procedure. Anyway, this is the traditional way. It's a local media, it's local. It's in the hand. It's in your hand. It's in your physical location. So it's a local install, as compared to some of the other ways we're going to talk about. And it's a full install. It could be an upgrade. We'll talk about that, full versus upgrade. But essentially, it's going to go through and change system files. So you're going to have some form of local media, and it's going to go through the hard drive storage and either completely copy over the operating system. We'll actually go through the steps a little bit later. Or it's going to upgrade any system files to move it up to a different version. So anyway, that's the DVD boot installation. There's also distribution share installation. This is a the important thing here to know is in a corporate environment, sometimes it is very possible, especially if you have a smaller company or a one-off. You could have sometimes companies will just have a machine that's unlike all other machines. It doesn't have a particular configuration that's going to get repeated very often, so you need to do a local install. What's going to happen is you're going to have the actual device you're doing, which I'll symbolize with a laptop here, one of my poorly drawn laptops. And what's going to happen is via wireless or wired, you're going to connect up to a server. Okay, this server is going to have all the installation media from here installed onto a distribution share, into a distribution share. Okay, so there's going to be a folder somewhere on here, right, for Win 10, right, Win 10 Professional, whatever, multi-edition, whatever you got out there, right? It's going to be your Win 10 distribution share. Now, what you're going to need to access it, and we talked about this a little bit earlier when we talked about sharing with Windows, is you're going to need a UNC. Let me think about, all right, so I think it's, yeah, backslashes and forward slashes always jump around crazy for me. So again, we're going to have a server name, right, so the name of the server, right, and then the share name, okay. So there's the share. And if we want a subfolder underneath the share, say there's a subfolder under Win 10 that we want to specifically get to, we would put the subfolder there, although that's optional. Okay. When it comes to distribution share, we want a direct link to the actual install file. Okay. So the distribution share can be created by Windows System Image Manager, which is part of the WAAK, which you're going to download as part of this lab. Again, you can, so what you're going to do is you're going to boot to a pre-installation environment. That's a fancy way of saying another operating system to run, and then you're going to run the setup from there. Now, what we would probably recommend doing that is probably Windows PE, all right? Which, by the way, PE is short for pre-install environments, right? So WinPE is a separate operating system. It's a very basic operating system is a good way to put it. And what it'll do is it'll give you simply a command prompt. That's all it does. But from that command prompt, you can load up network drivers and then point the install to the distribution share, and then it can install from this server share. Okay, that's the whole point of a distribution share. All right, and lastly, we have image-based. Now, let me make some points about this. So, traditionally, a lot of times when we talk about an image, case in point, these .isos, I just said we download .iso. That ISO is a 0 and 1, down to the binary level, copy of a DVD or a drive or a hard drive or files, right? An ISO can be a direct copy, okay? And for the longest time, that's what we referred to when we said to make an image of a hard disk or image of a drive, is to make a bit-for-bit copy. Now, there was problems with this. Obviously, if I take a direct clone copy of an operating system and then blast that clone onto another system's hard drive, there's bound to be a couple small changes to this other system, and it causes instability. In theory, there's still people who do this, and I don't want to poo-poo it. This is the way I learned how to image machines, and we made it work. But Microsoft is a little concerned because taking their beautiful operating system and just transplanting the brain into another body is bound to have problems by their justification, particularly if it's different hardware. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. And that I can testify. You'd have stability issues if you just kind of put it into different hardware. Yeah, plug and play would come up and do its best to install everything, but it's a big culture shock. Okay, for the operating system. So what Microsoft came up with a system says, listen, if we're going to do an image, right? Let me erase everything here. If I'm going to make an image, so here's my Windows 10, right? Now this whole thing is Windows 10, right? Windows 10 is comprised of user profiles, which we want. We like those user profiles. The users like their environments, right? So we have a user profile, okay? We have system files. We have the sysvol, if you will, right? So we have system files, right? So what Microsoft says is, listen, it would be better if we just reinstalled Windows 10. We get that you want the user, oh, and we have applications too. So we have program files and stuff like that. So we have programs, excuse me, right? So Windows says, we get it. You want those profiles moved over. You want to be able to just load up. You don't want to go through and if you have 20 computers to install and go computer by computer and install the programs one by one. You'd rather just do it one time and then blow down an image to those 20 computers. We get that. But let us do a favor. Let us do us a favor. Let us install the system files. So this will be coming from kind of something very similar to a distribution share. It's part of the image where we're going to have a file called a WIM, okay, Windows image file, sometimes it's called. And we're going to create this WIM, and we're going to talk about this with this whole deployment thing. It's going to come up big. We're going to talk a lot about it. So we're going to take this WIM file, and we're going to have the system, built in is the system, but we're going to actually install Windows. We're going to have the user profiles, which will make part of that file, so you can make it actually in part of that file. Fantastic. And all these program files and everything that's in the installed as a program, including things that are in the registry, things that the program has put into your profiles, of course, all that will get stored as part of the WIM. Okay, so we're going to do a fresh install of the operating system and then make that operating system just like the operating system you pointed us to. That's what an image is, okay? So that can come from local media too. You can have a local copy of that WIM file and just blow it down, or you can grab it from a network drive. Again, boot to Windows PE, load the network drivers, run a program called DISM, which we'll talk about, and DISM will then, you can grab a network WIM folder, or the WIM file, and then install that image on the local machine. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about images, but just know that you can install based off an image. And then there's the good old-fashioned 1 and 0-bit install. Now, the good thing about this, so the Microsoft way, the WIM, as part of the installation process, it's going to regenerate SIDs, secure IDs for the users. It's going to machine the actual operating system. If you're in a domain environment, it will clear the machine ID or the SID of the PC in the domain controller. Those are things we had to worry about when we did a 0-for-0 copy. We had to go in afterwards and scrub out SIDs because it was going to, well, not user SIDs because that usually doesn't cause a problem. But the machine ID on the domain controller, we'd have to scrub that out and go in and get into the registry and change settings in order to kind of make it different enough that won't cause problems on our network. That's not a problem with the Microsoft-based images, so keep that in mind. All right. Next slide. So let's talk about upgrading Windows versus a clean installation. If you upgrade Windows, the best way to so old school people like myself are not big fans of upgrades because they've burnt us in the past. Okay, it's seen as a less stable way. I rather start with a clean slate. I'll blow everything out. Thank you very much. And then I'll install a brand new operating system, and then I'll copy all my files over, right? So that's one attitude. So a clean installation is the hard drive is wiped, it's formatted, all user data is lost, you can just do a fresh install of the operating system. So if you're doing an upgrade, you have to keep in mind the upgrade path. So for Windows 10, it has to be Windows 7 SP1. So if you don't have Service Pack 1 for Windows 7, you're going to have to upgrade to Service Pack 1 to go to Windows 10, or you could go to Windows 8.1 and then go to Windows 10 if you can't get your hands on the Service Pack. Yep. So that's what we call by upgrade path. And Microsoft's not that bad compared to like other things like Cisco or something, but upgrade paths, just be advised of that. Attempts to migrate user settings to a new machine. So again, it doesn't. So I should say migrate user settings. The user settings stay on the hard drive, but are they going to get recognized by the new operating system? Not all do. Okay, especially some applications too. So, but you should, in theory, if you do an upgrade and everything goes well, all the user settings, everything in their user profiles, all the applications should stay and work well. Again, us old timers are a little bit cynical about this, and we don't like it. But upgrades have gotten much better. So that's a tough call. It comes from experience. Doing enough upgrades versus doing enough clean installations, you end up getting a personal preference. All right. So one tool you can use to migrate all these user settings and files. So if you do a clean installation, you can use this tool called US. It X's out the whole thing, right? Yeah. You could use this one tool called USMT, which is user state migration tool. It's part of the WADK, which we download for this lab. And what it'll do, remember the profile, especially like default and some of the special profiles, you're not supposed to be able to just copy a profile over. You can't Control-C, Control-V and copy it over. There's a lot of settings in there that can go horribly wrong. So just keep that in mind when you do when you do a clean install. You could get this tool called the USMT. The USMT will then let you copy a profile, and then when you reinstall it, copy that profile over. The tool will do it, and it will do it properly. It's from Microsoft. All right. Let's talk about attended installations versus unattended installations. Not intended, unattended installations. Okay. Attended installation essentially means we've hopefully all done this at some point, but if you're installing Windows, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions like the time zone, computer name, keyboard layout, language, that kind of thing, right? So that's an attended installation. You need to click on things, you need to answer questions before you can go any further. Unattended install will not require human intervention, which is nice if you're like doing 10 machines, 5 machines, and you're doing installations in a row. What you can do is you create what's called a answer file. That answer file will have the answers to all its questions. By default, the file should be called unattend.xml. There are ways to specify different unattend files. And then if you run setup, if you do this the switch unattend after setup, it will start doing an unattended installation. It will look for unattend.xml as being the default. You could actually, after the switch, also specify a different file name if you so want. But essentially, this is an answer file. This XML file is an answer file that has all these answers, so it won't pester you. You don't have to click on anything during installation. You can walk away when you come back after all the passes, which we'll talk about in a sec. After all the passes, the Windows will be ready to go. Speaking of the passes, so this is product activation installation passes. There's a lot of information here. A lot of this is kind of informational. A couple concepts I do want to talk about is OOBE system. That's out-of-box experience. OOBE refers to that when Windows first comes up. If you think about if you ever bought a laptop, the first time you open up that laptop, it comes up, says welcome, give us a username, that kind of information, right? Any kind of specifics, customization. It might walk you through, hey, let's take a tour. That's the out-of-box experience, okay? So a lot of times we can generalize a system. So there's a program called Sysprep, which we'll use not in this lab, but in the next lab. Sysprep will go through and give that user that out-of-box experience, okay? Also, what it'll do is if you're imaging a machine, Sysprep will take out the security ID. That's the things that will generalize it, as we call it. All right, so let's talk about the installation though. We have Windows PE, a pre-install environment. Setup.exe starts and reads the answer file if there is a exe. This is the old name, Unattended.xml actually. That goes back to Windows 7, so that should probably get updated. The Windows PE configuration pass is performed. So what that primarily does is that's going to copy files to the local hard drive. And it starts copying critical files, decompressing the files. There are these files called .cabs. Those .cabs are decompressed. Once they're all decompressed in some basic configuration, including creating a boot sector that points to the installation process, the computer will reboot. When it does reboot, it's actually running a pared down version of Windows 10. It then starts installing more system configuration. It's looking for customized software. It starts installing like the video card, drivers for motherboard, drivers for mouse. All that stuff starts getting installed from the local files that copied over earlier. It creates an SID for the computer. It looks for plug and play components. And that's when it does the specialized configuration passes, when it starts doing the customization. All those questions it might ask start popping up. The computer reboots. Now you have a full-blown version of Windows 10. If it's the first time it's ever booted, it does the out-of-box experience, OOBE, and it says welcome. It asks you to set up another user, and Windows Welcome is displayed. All right. One more thing before I let you go, let's talk about product activation. So Microsoft requires activation via the internet. If you do not activate your products, it all depends on how new it is. It tends the newer products, they tend to give you they tend to be a lot more liberal as far as what they give you. As it gets older, like there was a version of Windows, I think 2000, maybe 98, that would just simply shut down after 60 minutes. So if you've been using it for 60 minutes, shuts down. Now this is after it's been end of life for a very long time. All right, Windows 7 probably has a while to go before they do something that extreme. But if you have an unactivated version of Windows 7 right now, you're not supposed to be on Windows 7, so they don't feel bad punishing you. Okay, you can lose a lot of features. The screen might go black after an hour or something like that, and then it does little things to mess with you. So you are required to activate all your products. You may need to reactivate if you change a lot of hardware. So what happens is product activation, when it happens, records you entering a number, but also has, again, it tries to keep this process as secret as possible for obvious reasons. Microsoft doesn't want you knowing what things it actually looks for, but it's going to go through the devices located on the device, on the PC. Usually things that won't change, like the motherboard. Graphic cards supposedly are in that calculation. We know that because enough people on the internet have changed their graphic card and then forced to reactivate their products. But what it does is it goes through and it grabs a bunch, but not everyone. So it goes through and grabs some hardware on the machine, and it takes the hardware ID and it creates a hash based off those hardware IDs. So therefore, if you change any bit of hardware, then you're gonna have to. You may need to be required to change the activation key. All right. You can do that under Settings, Updated Security, Activation. So let's just talk about a couple, especially enterprise level special keys. We have a MAK, which is a multi-activation key. It's a single key that will let you activate multiple machines. Or you can have a key management service that's going to run on a server. When you install Windows, it will automatically grab a key. Every time it boots, actually grabs a key. And if it's not on the local system, it can cache the key and it'll work for a little bit. That's much like Active Directory based. Active Directory-based product activation, you're going to run into a system is going to get a key from the Active Directory server, and then after 180 days, if you're not an Active Directory server, you will lose that key, and then you'll start getting messages that your product activation is no longer good. All right, that covers installation. If there's any other questions, send me an email. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye.